Voices for Peace, and I'm sitting here today in Santa Cruz talking with Barry Smith. And we're talking some jazz here.
Yeah.
Apparently, Barry's sister, what was her name?
Judy Smith.
Judy Smith. Was a jazz hound. She passed away
About 2 years ago.
about 2 years ago. And where were we? We were talking about
Well, we're back in
Mingus.
'59, and my sister called me up and said that her friend Danny Richmond, Mingus's drummer, was in town. The band was going to play the jazz workshop, and at that time, she and her boyfriend, Via Marks, who's a pretty well-known artist today, they had a cabin over in Mill Valley up in the mountain. And Danny was going to come over and spend the night there, and so did I want to come over? You know?
Wow.
So I made a beeline for the workshop, and this was the band that included Roswell Rudd, the white trombone player, and a new saxophone phenomenon that nobody had ever heard of before, a guy named Roland Kirk.
That guy? You mean the guy who plays 3 saxes at once?
Yeah. He wasn't known as Rassan yet.
Oh.
He was just Roland Kirk, the blindest saxophone player you ever saw in your life. And of course, this was their first night at the workshop, so he was crashing into all the microphones and everything. Hadn't quite figured out where everything was. But the music that the man played, the circular breathing, the 3 horns, all of that stuff, it was completely new to me, and it just blew me away. And Danny, whose job it was to keep this improbable aggregation together and functioning, he had to wait around until the end of the show, and make sure that Roland Kirk got to his hotel safely. Danny had a brand new '59 Buick that was a big cookie cutter taillights and sort of the wraparound fins. That's how I remember it was '59. So at the end of this just unbelievable set, Roland Kirk throws his various horns, which are all held together with tape and rubber bands, into a golf bag. That's what he has for a case.
A golf bag.
A golf bag. He just
Like I
tosses
say,
them all in there.
Give me the number 9 horn.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so we get him into the Buick and drive him over to the hotel. And then you could just see Danny kind of just give a big sigh. It's the first time he's had a moment to relax in several months, probably. They'd been on this tour through the South, and this is '59. This is really just before the Civil Rights Movement. So the South was solidly segregated. There was white and black everywhere, waiting rooms and cooking pots, the works, And they'd been on this tour. They had a big Cadillac, and Roswell Rudd, the white guy, the trombone player, he wore a chauffeur's cap and a jacket, and he drove. And every time they'd come to one of these Torch gas stations or something, he'd get out and open the door for Mingus and the other guys.
I love that. That's fantastic.
Yeah. So somehow they survived all this.
Well, I hope it shook up some squares down there.
So we spent the night talking about all this stuff. It was just amazing. And then I saw Roland Kirk a couple of other times after that. When he became famous, he became Rassan Roland Kirk after that. And the last time I saw him...
Did he accept the Muslim faith? Is that what happened? Or?
I don't know. I don't know what that was. I don't know what Rassan means, but he was playing in Berkeley, a place called Mandrakes. It used to be down there below San Pablo on University, down on 10th Street. And I was just driving into Berkeley, and I saw this big crowd spilled out into the street. I was like, what the hell is that, And I see the little sign that says Roland Kirk. Holy shit, So I pulled over, and I managed to get in just after they'd been out in the street. he's totally blind, and he'd led the entire crowd out into University Avenue there, right down the middle of the street, playing his horn. Had them all following him like the Pied Piper, And he just gone back inside, and the crowd was just wild, and I couldn't see anything, but everybody was on their tiptoes trying to see the bandstand and everything. Apparently he had some chick giving him head while he was playing.
Oh, you're kidding. That's outrageous.
That's Roland Kirk, man. Man was the
last time I think I even listened to his music was at your place many years ago.
Huh.
Probably 20 years ago. Has it been that long? Not sure.
Probably. Yeah, 20 years, that's nothing.
Yeah. The Diablo Canyon action was 81, right?
Yeah. And then there was Vandenberg and
Livermore,
a couple of times Livermore. Yeah, we did Vandenberg twice.
Oh, I understand. You got pretty close to a missile silo there.
A little too close.
Well, tell me about that. What happened?
Well, you remember the first time we went. That was in February, I think. And we went with our whole affinity group, grandmother. There were about 10 of us, I guess, and we didn't make any attempt to evade anybody. We just went straight across country, heading for the launch pad. It was at a time when Reagan was escalating left and right. He was installing those intermediate range missiles in Europe over the objection of everybody. And so the development of the MX missile was seen as a very destabilizing element. It's a first strike weapon, solid fuel rocket. It doesn't require any preparation at all. You just fire it when you're ready to go. So it would give you a decided advantage in any kind of a first strike.
Because it's just ready right then and there. It doesn't need any.
Yeah, the kind
refueling.
The other kind, most of the intercontinental missiles are liquid fuel, just like the space shuttle is, and they require preparation. You have to fuel these things. They all use this frozen fuel, so you can't let it sit around in the tanks. You have to fuel the thing, fire it. That's why they have these countdowns and everything. That's why they abort these missions, and it's a big time-consuming process. But solid fueled rockets are another matter altogether. And they finally developed an intercontinental range DMX with 10 separate warheads, so that the nose cone of the thing, instead of just being a single warhead, it's called a bus, and it has 10 on it, and it cruises along, dropping off these warheads on 10 different targets. A really nasty piece of work. So we were trying to stop this thing from being tested, so we went there, and pretty soon we were escorted by an air police guy, and then they took us to the lockup, and actually we had a pretty marvelous time there once they got through with Tim. Remember, so we used to call Tim Captain.
Right.
And as soon as they heard that, they grabbed Tim and took him out and made him lay in the wet grass with dogs barking at him and everything. They scared the shit out of him.
Because he thought he was the leader?
Yeah, they were looking for the leaders. Of course, we didn't know the leaders.
Hey, Tim told me a wonderful story about this yellow bird that came into where everybody was being held, and he knew it was Kizu, the Buddhist monk that Marjorie used to hang out with.
Yeah.
It flew in from one little hole, went across the gym, and then back out through the hole. And he knew it was a sign that,
Well, you know what else was going on there?
What?
Marjorie, who was very much into this, the Niposam Yohoji people, with their 90-some-year-old patriarch and everything. And
Nichidatsu Fuji.
Yeah. We were stuck in this Air Force lockup there, waiting to see what they were going to do with us, and they brought us the usual bologna sandwiches, which nobody wanted to eat. So these people were into building peace pagodas everywhere they went. So I don't remember whose idea it was. I suspect it must have been mine, because Marjorie was a little bit shocked at the idea, but she quickly joined me as we constructed a peace pagoda out of white bread and bologna. And I thought it was perfect.
Beautiful.
but she thought it was a little bit...
well, with the meat and everything now.
Yeah. But no, any religious edifice made out of white bread and bologna would be just about right. So. Anyway, so we constructed a peace pagoda right there in Vandenberg out of material at hand, and that's, we left it behind, when we were finally transferred out of there. And somehow this story got back to the Buddhists in Japan, and she was just mortified to find out about it, and they did, they did hear about it. But they loved it, of course, and especially the old guy. He thought it was just wonderful.
Oh, it's fantastic.
And years later, well, a couple of years later actually, it was only a year later actually, when we were doing that thing that we're about to do again at Livermore, the Hands Around Livermore thing, in 83 I guess it was. Isn't that the last time we did it? 83? Must have been, because it's 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So we all ended up basically in Santa Rita, Pleasanton, the federal part of Santa Rita. There's about 600 of us there, including Daniel Ellsberg. And the Buddhists were there. They didn't get arrested because of their dicey standing with immigration and everything. They can't do that, but they're always there. They were there at Vandenberg and doing their chanting, with their drums and everything, and giving us all the support. So they were there, and then we all got arrested, and they got us in this, basically in a big pen right next to the freeway, right next to 580. And we had these styrofoam cups that they gave us. Maybe had coffee or something in them. I don't remember what it was, but these cups fit very nicely in the cyclone fence. You could just stick them in the cyclone fence, and so we made a huge peace sign out of styrofoam cups.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And just about the time we finished this, before the cops became aware of it or anything, could do anything, because there was a big bunch of us milling around, they couldn't really see. This little Toyota pulls up in the middle of the freeway and stops. And it was almost like the circus car with all the clowns in it,
Yeah.
All these saffron-robed, bald-headed monks and nuns start piling out of this car right in the middle of the freeway. And they all face over where we are, and they start chanting and bowing to us and everything. It was just beautiful.
Oh, man.
And it was them. The old guy was there with them.
Really?
Yeah.
Nichidatsu was with him. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a beautiful guy. He died, I think, in...
Not long after that.
Yeah, 86, I think. He was 100 years old.
Yep. Well, that's the one where Ellsberg was in there with us, and he decided to conduct a seminar since we were all bored, we had nothing to do. He said, well, I'll have a little seminar. And he said, since it's 82 or whatever it was, he said, this is the 20th anniversary of the Bay of Pigs, not the Bay of Pigs, but the Cuban Missile Crisis. And he said...
now, at that time, Daniel, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, worked for the Pentagon.
That's right. He told us that he was one of the best and the brightest, or whatever it was that Kennedy called all those people from Harvard, that went into the government and the Pentagon and the military. Well, Ellsberg was one of these fellows, and he was put right in charge of assessing what intelligence they had at the time, which was certainly a lot more limited than we have now. They didn't have satellites and so forth then. They did have the U-2 flights, but then they mostly relied on inside spies and various methods to determine just how many of these ICBMs Khrushchev had, because the Russians did have an advantage in that one area. They had these intercontinental ballistic missiles, because they didn't have the things that we had. We had intermediate range missiles surrounding the Soviet Union. We had bases everywhere. They didn't have those except in Cuba. And that was what this big beef was all about. They were trying to give us a taste of what it's like to have somebody breathing down your throat with these missiles pointing at you. And we responded rather badly to, they just wanted to negotiate. They wanted us to negotiate withdrawing all these things from their borders, and so they gave us a taste of it, basically is what it was about. But of course, we responded by going to full military panic and sending the Navy out to confront them on the high seas. Well, it so happens that I was in Santa Rita at the time, on basically a ridiculous traffic kind of thing.
So it wasn't a political action, was it?
No, although I was considered a political prisoner because I'd gotten a 4-month sentence for simply having long hair on a simple
now, what year was this?
Violation. 62, October 62.
Yeah, not too many people had long hair then.
No.
I guess that could be a political statement.
But I happened to be in there with the Everyman crew, which was a group of a half a dozen people who tried to sail a trimaran out to, what was it, Johnston Island or Christmas Island or someplace out there where they were shooting off hydrogen bombs in the Pacific. So they were going to sail this trimaran into the zone and prevent them from carrying out the tests. So they simply sent the Coast Guard to board them on the high seas, and they had a court order against them and all that. So they were jailed for contempt of court in Santa Rita, which is a federal prison as well as being a county jail. And just by coincidence, we were all in there together. And these were some friends of mine, especially Barton Stone, who was a Zen carpenter and musical instrument maker, who had already, at that time, been to Russia, walked to Russia on these peace walks. They had a couple of them.
Wow.
You know. So Barton and I were pretty good friends, and when this Cuba Missile Crisis happened, everybody thought the war was about to start any minute. It was like they'd sent the Navy out to confront the Russian Navy on the high seas and turn them back, and there was no question in anybody's mind that this was going to result in a nuclear exchange.
Now they were going to blockade Cuba to keep the missile parts from getting to Cuba?
Yeah, the Russian ships were out there. They'd spotted them coming. They were escorted by Russian naval vessels, and they sent the U.S. Navy out to turn them around.
That must have engendered a few tense moments out there on the high seas.
Interestingly, the cops, the guards told us that when the bomb went off, they weren't going to keep us there.
They were going to, what, let you go?
Yeah.
Oh.
They were probably just going to run like hell. That's what they were going to do. In other words, we're not going to be here, don't worry about it.
Where are you going to run to?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So Ellsberg is analyzing all this information, and he tells Kennedy that they only have 6. They only have 6 ICBMs. Now we've got all these dozens of missiles surrounding the Soviet Union, plus we had the submarine-based missiles, which they didn't have yet, and we had the strategic bombers positioned everywhere around them. So these missiles were kind of critical in terms of what their response might be. And knowing that they only had 6 of doubtful reliability emboldened Kennedy, and that's why he called for the showdown.
I see.
And that's probably why Khrushchev decided to turn him around. So here we are 20 years later, and I've met Barton on on the line out there at Livermore. Hadn't seen him since then, really. And he's now an animal rights vegan, you know.
Oh.
And so
He hasn't gotten in trouble recently, has he?
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, because there's an animal rights vegan activist who's gotten in some kind of trouble, and he's looking at some serious time in prison.
You don't mean the guy that torched the SUVs in Oregon?
Is that guy? Is that what happened?
His name's Free. I forget what his...
I've been hearing it on the news a lot. I'm not
They
sure.
gave him 22 years for torching 3 SUVs at a Chevy dealership. Yeah. And then he wrote a letter about his experiences and, advising others in the ELF how to conduct themselves in an honorable way.
Yeah, I think
and
this
so
is the
forth.
guy, you know.
And as soon as he wrote this letter, they sent 4 guards into his cell, took him down, handcuffed him, and threw him in the hole for 120 days, which is where he is now, simply for speaking out.
Now, if this had happened during a football riot or soccer hooliganism,
Yeah.
they would have just had to pay for the cars or something.
It's about $40,000 worth of damage.
Yeah, this guy's paying 22 years of his life.
Yeah.
Because of his intention, the thoughts in his mind.
That's right. Strictly because of his politics. He's an anarchist.
Yeah.
He's called an eco-terrorist, of course. The guard at the watchman, that is, at the dealership said he was never in any danger. Nobody was ever in any serious danger. I mean, of course, a fire's a fire, but it just did, I suppose, superficial damage.
Yeah. There was some vandalism to cars down here during, just as the Gulf War, or the Gulf War II was heating up, across from the induction center on 41st Avenue. I was down there a couple times, maintaining a presence. There was vigils there. Although every day that we would have a vigil, the Marines and the Navy and the Army, they would just close the office and not even be there. So that's sort of how they dealt with it.
Yeah. But anyway, Ellsberg is telling us this fascinating story about how he was the guy, kind of the point man, in the middle of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Well, I was sitting in Santa Rita. Here we are 20 years later, and I'm having a reunion with Bart and Stone in Santa Rita, and this time Ellsberg's in there with us.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It really was.
Did you get to have a lot of conversations with him?
Yeah, he's a great guy.
Wow. Did he talk to you about what about his conversion?
He did, and that is an even more interesting story. It involves Gary Snyder.
Really?
Yeah.
I like Gary.
Well, you might recall that after the war, he was the one who left the beat scene and went to Japan on a freighter.
All right.
Got on one of those, he got a merchant seaman's card, and he went on one of those Marus to Japan, and then he headed for a monastery out in the country somewhere and sat on the steps until they let him in and became a monk. He was studying some translations of some Chinese poetry or something like that, some Zen stuff. And he spent a couple of years doing that. Well, Ellsberg was in the Army. This was before he was assigned to the Pentagon. And he had just joined the Army, and I guess it was in the early 50s. Maybe even before the Korean War, or maybe just after. It was sometime in there. I don't really recall what the date was, but he was stationed in Korea. And so he ended up in Japan, either coming or going, and was looking for something a little out of the way, and found this little village somewhere, and a little Saturday night, looking for some place to go and have a drink or something, and he ends up in this little bar, I suppose, or whatever it was. There's an American over there. He strikes up conversation with him, and of course it's Gary Snyder. So they hit it off right away. They didn't agree about anything, but but they had a wonderful time just hanging out and talking. And so apparently Gary was able to plant all these seeds in Ellsberg that eventually, he says, are what caused him to question all this stuff. And in fact, years later, when Gary Snyder came back from Japan with a Japanese wife and a couple of kids, and they settled up in the Sierra foothills up near Nevada City, and he was building himself a house up there, and he had a bunch of poems. I guess he had owned that land for some time. When he had originally gone to Japan, he had taken a bunch of his poetry and sort of buried it at the base of this oak tree, and so he went back there, and he, in fact, to the Black Oak bookstore where Snyder was speaking about these poems. He had just kind of dug them up and published them. This is stuff that he'd written when he was 18 or so. And anyway, and he told this story about, that's how I learned the part about Ellsberg. So Ellsberg found out that he was up in the Sierra foothills and rented a car, and he was on his honeymoon, I think. And he went up there and looked him up, and of course it's a very remote place and hotter than hell. It's probably 120 degrees, and all these people are helping out. They're building a foundation maybe or something on this house, and he drives up and he says, "Do you remember me? We met in Japan and we had this conversation." "Oh yeah." And he says, "Well, you know, I never forgot about that, and you're going to hear about something in the next couple of days, and I just wanted you to know that it was all because of you." And that's when the Pentagon Papers came out.
Wow. Oh, man, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I had no idea about
So, you never know.
that.
No, you never know. In fact, Snyder talked about when he was in high school up in Oregon. It was during the war, and he decided to take this trek up through the Cascades. I guess that's the range up there. And it's the area that includes Mount St. Helens. And he was following the elk trails. And at that time, of course, it was all very pristine. There was no clear cutting or any of that stuff going on.
Mm-hmm.
So he had a couple of weeks where he just followed these elk trails, and he was trying to create some poetic reference to the following these elk trails, and he was writing all this stuff. And after a couple of weeks, he comes down, and the place where he first encountered anybody was a place called, I think it's called Spirit Lake.
I've heard of Spirit Lake. You know, you heard a lot about it after the eruption.
Yeah, and of course, there's the newspaper on the rack there, and the newspaper says atomic bomb destroys Hiroshima, and then it quotes President Truman as saying that nothing will ever grow there again, and it's completely devastated, and describing the horror of this new weapon and everything. And of course, the guy that runs the trading post there is named Harry Truman.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was the strange thing about it.
That is a weird coincidence.
Yeah, so he says he was thinking at the time, when he was 18, about the horror of what happened to Hiroshima, how nothing would ever grow there again, and how beautiful this and timeless and this wilderness was that he'd just been through, following these ancient elk trails and everything. He said, well, now you go up there, and it's all been destroyed. There's a little strip of trees on either side of the freeway, and the rest of it's all clear cut. And then you get up to Mount St. Helens, that's gone. The whole mountain's gone. Spirit Lake's gone. Harry Truman's gone. And he
he's
said,
buried underneath
yeah,
by a
and he
mile
said,
of ash.
if you go to Hiroshima, you know, that's a thriving metropolis.
Yeah. Well, they've kept that one church in Hiroshima as I guess a monument.
Yeah.
You no doubt have heard about the Hiroshima Walk, right? That's where they brought original fire from Hiroshima over here to America. I think Marjorie was on that walk for a while. They brought it over by boat to Mexico. There's a shrine or a temple in Hiroshima where they keep the fire burning from the original fire. And so they got it in a lantern and brought it over on a boat to Mexico and then walked up, I guess, and then up to New Mexico where it was destroyed in a Native American fire ceremony of some
All
kind.
right. A thriving metropolis.
There's a Buddhist lesson in there somewhere.
Somewhere.
I think. Yeah.
But the deal at Vandenberg was after we got out of there, a couple months later, they still hadn't succeeded in testing the MX for various reasons. And they were gearing up to actually make the first flight test, which would put it into production and everything. So Leo went on down there, and I promised that I would join him as soon as I could. I had a family and everything. It was a little more complicated for me, but he managed to get himself arrested. And because we had been at this previous demonstration, we had these ban and bar letters from the commander that said if you even set foot on this property, you get 6 months in federal prison. So that, or 60 days or something, I don't remember what it was. So we were looking at the certainty of actually doing a little stretch in jail this time, if we got caught. And, you know, it seemed highly unlikely that we'd go through there without getting picked up. So Leo was sent to Terminal Island down there in L.A., Long Beach. And he did about 60 days down there. It was a pretty hard time before I could get down there to join him. But I went anyway, and a couple of my friends were going, and they had a Volkswagen bus, you know, and the guy picks up his old girlfriend, and off we go. And his buddy had outfitted him with new boots, and we were trying to figure out how we were going to get into the test pad, because the previous trip was enough to know exactly where it was. We'd gotten within about a half a mile of it before and could see it. It's right next to the water. In fact, the Amtrak goes right by it, the launch pad. So we're thinking, well, we could always maybe jump on the Amtrak, buy a ticket on the Amtrak and then jump off the back or something. It didn't seem like it would work, but we were,
especially if it's moving about 50 miles an hour or something.
But, you know, that's sort of what we were thinking, and we didn't really know any better. And we got down to San Luis, and it was very late. And we went to, there was an office in town there of the organizers, and we went in there, and it was around midnight, and there were people there, and they were quite active because the thing was expected to be tested the next day or anytime.
Yeah.
It was a day-to-day thing. It was all about the weather and the fog and you know, the observables and all that. So we went in there, and the people I'd gone with decided to resume their previous personal relationship and forgot all about going in, and I was kind of on my own. And there were a couple of other people, there were 3 other people in there, a couple of guys who had some cameras who wanted to go in, get some pictures. And then a young fellow, about 18, a tall kid with a full set of camis on, and he had maps. And he looked like he was really prepared, so I hooked up with him. And the 4 of us were taken to a toxic waste dump and dropped off in the middle of a very dark night, no moon, no nothing. You could barely see your hand in front of your face. And they sort of pointed in a general direction, and off we went. And we must have been something like maybe 7 miles or so from where we were trying to get to.
Oh, you're trying to get to the silo, right?
Yeah, we were trying to get to the launch pad, hopefully before it got light. So we started out across these rolling hills, and there's a lot of cattle wandering around at night, and it was pretty uneventful. Eventually the two guys with the cameras wandered off on their own, and so it was just me and this kid. And looking at the maps from where we ended up, I kind of figured out where we were, and I could see that there was this creek indicated on the maps that went straight out to the beach. And I could see that if you could follow this creek, there'd undoubtedly be a culvert where this road crossed, and that would maybe get you through the road without being seen, and then you'd be out in the sand dunes where they probably weren't paying any attention to anything, and then you could circle around and come back to the launch pad. So that was my plan. So we get down in this, just as it's getting light, we get down into this creek, and just get down there, and this Jeep goes by, it didn't see us. So we made it that far. And it was in the spring, so it had been a heavy winter, and there was lots and lots of brush and everything piled up in the creek. And you could just, by wading in the water, following the creek, you could just make your way, and you couldn't be seen from the roads. So it was working out pretty good. But it was very slow going. And it was about 10 o'clock in the morning, and we came across an old friend of mine anchored down there.
Really?
A guy from Canyon. Yeah, he used to run the Vocations for Social Change, it was called. And he was just exhausted, and he was down there, and he said, well, I've had it, I can't go any further, but if you guys keep going, I'll make a diversion here. I'll make some noise or something and let him arrest me, and that'll give you a chance to get through, and something like that. So as we were sitting there talking, we hear this dog barking, not 20 feet away. There's apparently a little road or something just up out of the brush. So we sort of froze and shut up and everything. The dog was barking, and the soldier that was handler that was with him was saying, "Heel, heel, goddammit, heel!" And the dog finally shut up, and they wandered away. So,
wow.
So we kept going, and the thing just went on forever. I had no idea how far it was by looking at the map. When you're
Do you
trying
think
to
it was
wade.
Longer than 7 miles?
No, but when you're wading in the creek, 7 miles is a long way.
That's true, yeah.
It was cold,
Boulders.
and the water was cold and up to our legs, and I was doing all right. But I noticed this kid was kind of. It surprised me. He kind of ran out of gas. He got
the guy in the
hypothermia
camo?
or something. Yeah.
Oh.
He seemed to get hypothermia, maybe it was, and he was starting to stop and rest, and I was thinking, well, I don't like to leave him, but they're supposed to shoot this thing off today, and if somebody's got to be there, and we had these air horns they gave us. We had an air horn and some flares we were supposed to use. When we got there and noticed that they were about to do something, then we'd announce our presence that way, and they'd have to cancel the thing.
Right.
So I took the air horn and I gave him the flares, and I said, if it's okay with you, I'll just go ahead and we'll try to hook up later, because I think we have to move along,
Right.
He said, yeah, that's cool. So I kept going, and finally I got to a place where that culvert was. And sure enough, it's a big old 6-foot culvert going under the road, but there's a clear area with no brush for about 50 yards between where I am and to get into the culvert and get through it. And I look up on the bluffs, and there's a sentry up there.
Oh.
He's about maybe a quarter of a mile away, but probably closer than that. And he's got a cape on and blowing in the cape, and he's looking around and he's watching everything. And I thought, well, there's really nothing I can do. I just have to make the move and hope he's looking the other way. So that's what I did. I just went along and got into this culvert, and I got through it to the other side, on the ocean side, and it's all tules and stuff. So I stepped into these tules just as these two Jeeps came from opposite directions and stopped on the bridge with dogs in them. Oh shit, that didn't take long. Oh, well, and then I hear these two guys talking, and they're just talking ordinary stuff about where they're going to go, what they're going to do. And there's no alarm of any kind. And then they take off. So I thought, well, so I only had a little ways to go, kind of on my belly and everything through the sand dunes before I was out of sight of this guy up on the bluffs. And then I could just relax. I could stand up and just walk through the dunes. And it was a series of strange things like that. There was a hawk that came down and just about landed on my shoulder. He was just hovering right over me. And then there was a little fawn, a little spotted fawn, and I almost stepped on him. And he didn't do anything. He just looked at me, kind of quizzically, and I wandered around him. I began to think something's odd, And I was wearing these Guatemalan drawstring pants and sandals, and
I think I remember those pants.
Yeah, and a sweater, and a beret. That's just what I happened to grab before I left, So eventually I get down
Standard grandmother issue.
Yeah, eventually I get to the point where I think it's the pad is, and I approach the tracks from the ocean side, and here comes the Amtrak, and it goes roaring by. That's the train I would have been on and tried to get off of, and it's got a Jeep following it right down the tracks.
Oh, wow.
So that was out, But they go by, and everybody's looking the other way. They weren't looking out my way. They were all looking at the missile pad. So nobody sees me, and they all go by. And then, so I cross the tracks. Nobody sees me, and I get into the sand dunes around the launch pad. And there's no activity that I can see, but I can hear radios, walkie-talkies and stuff, talking about having arrested so-and-so and this and that is going on. I can't tell quite where it's coming from. It's over the next sand dune or something. So I'm playing it fairly cautious, and there doesn't seem to be anything going on, and I'm just exhausted by then. I've been on my feet for over 12 hours, and it's in the afternoon, and so I just crawled under some sage and took a nap because I was just beat, And when I woke up, I could see some high-flying helicopters and that sort of thing, but nothing else. It seemed like everybody cleared out. I thought, well, I guess they scrubbed it again. They're not going to do it today. So I start looking around. There's a pond there. I thought, there's a place you could go to hide from the dogs. You could get in there maybe with a reed or something. And I'm having all these fantasies about how I'd play hide and seek with these guys if they showed up around there and everything. And I'm studying I'm laying on the sand dune. It's a bowl. It's a bowl formed by these sand dunes, and then down in the bottom of this bowl is the pad, and it's about 100 yards across. The whole thing is pretty small. And you can see this cylinder in the middle of the launch pad, and it's tilted slightly toward the ocean, and it's on some kind of a swivel. And I didn't know how this thing worked. Nobody gave me any kind of briefing. And I really wasn't familiar with the details of the operation of this missile, so I'm trying to figure it out. I'm looking at it, and I can see that there's no place for all the exhaust to go. How could they fire it in there? Because there's no, how they usually funnel it out somewhere.
Yeah.
And I could see evidence of various test stands and things around there where they had it set up for that. You could see all the exhaust all over the walls and things, and some of these hangers and things. I can't figure it out. And then I see the little corner of something. It looks like a dumpster, and I thought, well, I think I will wait till it gets dark, and then I'll go over to that dumpster and see if I can find a tarp or something in there, because I'm going to be freezing my ass off tonight. I figured I'm going to be the only one out there. I'll have to stay until somebody else comes, and just in case and all that. And I had all these vague kind of plans about what the hell I'm trying to do there. I didn't really have anything very figured out. I saw a couple of deer wander by. And then I go back to studying the missile, and it's in this little fenced-in area, a little cyclone fence around it. And there's a little kind of a hut thing at the base of it. I thought might be a dog kennel or something. I was trying to decide whether I should go up to it or not. If anybody's around, they'll certainly see me, but I'd like to go up right to the fence there. There were some red-winged blackbirds on the fence, so that's how I can estimate how close I was to it. I was close enough so that I could see the red on the red-winged blackbird's
Oh, man.
wing on the cyclone fence around this thing. So I figured it was about maybe 300 yards at the most. And I haven't heard a sound for probably 20 hours, you know, except a whisper maybe.
Uh-huh.
And while I'm looking at this cylinder, it's about 80 feet high and about 8 feet in diameter, and it's got a tarp over the top of it, a weather tarp. And all of a sudden, that tarp exploded. They had pyrotechnic charges. It's the weather cover, and it's just bam, 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 and just as I'm looking at this thing, it explodes, and then the nose cone comes up out of there just like the head of somebody, and I know it's got these 10, well, they're dummy warheads, but you know,
Right.
10 warheads in there, and the thing just slowly comes up out of there. It's like it's looking at me, you know. And the whole thing was like.
So yeah, it
And
was
there's no sound after the explosion. There's no roar. There's no smoke. And this missile is lifting up out of this tube. And I was just in shock. And right under it, and it's slowly coming up out of there, and then it just lurches out and hangs in the air. But still nothing, you know. And I go, what the hell what's going on, you know? And then it ignites. And this enormous flame and smoke and just bone-shattering roar, and I'm trying to bury my head in the sand, and you know, I mean, this thing is just going off, you know. And fortunately, there was an offshore breeze, which was blowing the smoke. I mean, this big arm of this toxic crap was reaching right out towards me.
I can imagine that stuff is not good to breathe.
No. But there was just enough of a breeze to kind of bend it away from me and send it in, you know.
That was fortunate.
Yeah, and it starts climbing, you know. And of course there's an aircraft carrier parked out on the horizon to monitor all this. And also the Rainbow Warrior had been run off by the helicopters just before that. All of these were signs that I didn't pick up, you know, that the launch was imminent. The fact that there was nobody there, all these different things.
Right.
I didn't add any of it up. But this thing is climbing up, and it finally gets up high enough so that I can kind of stand it, you know, the sound of it. And then I see it pop a stage, and then it starts to arc out over the water, and then it gets up above where the air is, and it doesn't make any more noise. But I can still see it clearly, and it's shooting out. It goes out over the aircraft carrier, and it's heading for Kwajalein, you know. And I'm thinking about these poor bastards in their little concentration camp in Kwajalein, waiting for this thing to splash down in the lagoon there. And I felt like such a damn fool. I could have stopped it easily if I'd just known what was going on. All I had to do was blow off that horn. And
I was going to ask you about that. You know, you just the whole enormity of the event probably overwhelmed you or something.
Yeah, well, it was too late.
Yeah.
I mean, once they shot it, it was too late. And if I'd only known a little bit more about how the thing operated, I would have recognized a number of things. For instance, I remember when I first woke up from my nap and looked around, there's a mast on the launching pad with a red and a green light on it.
Yeah.
Like a navigation thing or something. And I wasn't looking directly at it, but I saw it out of peripheral vision. I saw that light change from green to red. And that's when they started the countdown, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
That's to warn everybody away. So that would have been clear to me if I'd just known what the hell I was looking at, you know. Anyway, and I didn't even remember that until I woke up the next night and from a dream. I saw that same thing, and then that's when I realized that I had seen the sign, you know. And I had.
Well, you see, this is very valuable information because now you sort of have, there's this knowledge about what happens at a launch.
Oh,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Look for these signs, you know.
Yeah.
The pyrotechnics with the canvas.
Yeah.
So,
well, I didn't understand any of this stuff, and so there I am, feeling a complete fool, laying on the sand dune. Well, at least I'm okay, and So then a fire engine comes out of what I thought was a dumpster. It turns out that's the bunker. And the bunker, a fire engine comes out of there, just calmly drives up, and I could see the letters on the side of it. I was close enough to see the letters on the side of the fire engine. I couldn't read them, but I could see the letters. And then these guys in jumpsuits, they're all just kind of languishing around. There's nothing for them to do. And the lanyard that was attached to the weatherhead, that's slapping against the side of the canister, you know, smack, smack, smack. And then a voice over a loudspeaker says, so-and-so, report to so-and-so, and that kind of stuff. And everything's very normal. And then I look over there, and there's an AP with a dog, and he's got binoculars and everything. So I said, well, I'm going to at least let him know I was here. So they're all standing around down there, and I give them about 10 seconds on the air horn.
Yeah.
Well, in that kind of bowl, you know, the sound must have bounced around, and they were looking every which way. They didn't know where it was coming from. And I didn't jump up and down or anything. I figured they were going to get me, but I wasn't going to make it, you know, that easy. So I just stayed hunkered down. I'm just behind a little piece of sage, and the dog's looking right at me, and the guy with the binoculars is looking right at me. But the sun is low. It's about 7 o'clock in June, I think it was, and the sun is still not down yet, and it's right in his eyes. See, it's behind me from where he was. So it's possible that he didn't see me, or it's possible that he did see me and realized what a fuck-up I represented, and maybe I'd just go away, which is, you know, so that nobody would have to explain or account for my presence there. And I decided that was a deal I'd take, you know. So that's what I did. I just sort of slipped back down the backside of the dune and headed for the tracks. Nobody stopped me. I got on the tracks and I started walking out of there. And I walked about 7 miles and saw some really strange things. First of all, there was a big aurora caused by the rocket.
An aurora?
Yeah. Oh, that happens frequently.
Aurora borealis type thing?
Yeah, ionized particles in the upper atmosphere from the rocket.
Really?
Yeah, it's identical to an aurora borealis. Kind of green usually. Often when they shoot off rockets at Vandenberg, these things are seen all over the state because they're up so high. So I was watching that as the sun was setting, and then a huge bat flew down the railroad tracks, and I could hear a sort of this kind of squeaking sound.
So like the radar.
It sounded like, yeah, but it sounded like a squeaking wheel bearing, and I thought it was going to be somebody on one of those little hand carts coming along because of the way it sounded. And I looked around, and here it is. It's this flying thing, and a big one, man, coming right down the tracks. And I had already jumped off the tracks and got down in the bushes, and it goes by. It's getting weirder and weirder, you know. Yeah. So I got back up on the tracks, and I followed him into where there's a little town called Casmalia. It's some kind of a little farm town or something there. And that's the first thing you come to. The tracks go right through there. So I got that far, and I could see a couple of farmhouses and a few barking dogs. And then I see there's a restaurant and a bar, 2 separate buildings. A bunch of cars parked down there. So I think, and I'm all covered with weeds and stuff, and this, you know, and I got to get to a telephone and call my family and let them know I'm all right and come and get me and all. So I decided to go into the bar. I walk in there, and there's this really gorgeous blonde in a red sweater and a white cowboy hat. I mean, straight out of Playboy, you know, just an incredible fox. And she's the bartender. And I walk in, and there's about a half a dozen people in there. Could I use the phone? And she said, it has to be collect. I said, fine, yeah. And she said, okay. And you have to talk to the operator and all that. So she gives me the phone, and I called my home, and the line's busy. So before I could even hand her the phone back, somebody plunks a long-necked bud on the bar next to me, and he says, you know, they already shot it, because he knew immediately what I was there for. And I said, yeah, I know, I was right under the damn thing. So these were all people who worked on the base and everything, and they didn't have any problem with me at all, and they were very friendly to me. And I had to hang out there for several hours before we could, you know, arrange for my friends to come with that Volkswagen and pick me up. So finally they did, and I just collapsed into the back of the thing and didn't wake up until we were back in Santa Cruz, and then I just crawled into bed again. And then the phone started ringing, and it was the organizers wanted to know if I would be willing to talk to the media about it, because they figured that, well, we didn't stop it, but at least we can embarrass them by showing that people were right there and they shouldn't have even shot it and all that. And then I found out that there were 100 reporters just out of my sight in a grandstand to view the thing. And if I had gone down there, it would have been a big deal.
It would have been that. Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I just screwed up completely.
Well,
but
at least
anyway,
you didn't have to do the 60 days or whatever.
So I talked to the KPFK people, the KPFA people, and they put it on their news, just a brief account. And then somebody from the Seattle Post-Intelligencer called, and I told him the story. And then the NPR people called. And the NPR guy says, well, we're going to do a little check and we'll call you back. And he actually did call me back. And he said, well, we talked to the Pentagon, and they said you don't exist, so we can't use the story.
Oh, so they...
But I thought, that's not bad. If the Pentagon says I don't exist, that's fine with me.
Oh, that's nice.
And I've gone with that ever since.
Maybe they expunged all your records.
Maybe I got to thinking, this was a very strange day. I think I was invisible for at least half of the day. The way those animals looked at me and stuff, and the way that guard didn't see me, I must have been invisible. I don't know any other way to explain it. But there it is.
Wow, invisible.
Maybe I didn't exist that day.
Well, you didn't get arrested that time. But I remember another time you did get arrested at Diablo Canyon. The cops got a little rough with you there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was a great one,
They were fingerprinting you?
Yeah, that's after we were up on the mountain overlooking the reactor. We were there all night and all day, and we made a big banner out of our tarps that said "Stop Diablo," and they couldn't get up there, And finally, they got tired of it because we were right on top of them where they were having their little parade ground and their helicopters and all that. And they finally sent a helicopter, one of these double rotor helicopters, full of these cops in their combat boots and everything up to get us. And they told us after they arrested us that they tried to do an Apocalypse Now thing, the opening scene from Apocalypse Now where the helicopter leaps up and they're playing Also Sprach Zarathustra or something, or whatever the theme is.
Or Ride of the Valkyries.
Whatever it is, yeah. And they tried to do that. Anyway, then they got out in the grass and they couldn't even stand up. They had these slick-soled combat boots and the grass was real slick. And they were falling all over themselves. And they had to get us at least several hundred yards down the mountain to where they were able to get a truck. And so they had to escort us, and for the most part, we cooperated. But Bilbo Baggins, he went limp on it. And were they furious with him for that.
I remember they dragged him through some brambles and
They
stuff.
picked him up, and there were, of course, rocks sticking up out of the grass here and there, and they threw him down bodily on every rock they could find. I mean, the dust was clouds of dust were coming up, and brambles and briars and everything, and he's covered from head to toe with these briars, and I'm thinking, damn, he's gonna be really beat to shit, And we get into the truck, and we get a chance to talk to some of these guys a little bit and tell them what's up. And
some of them were a little bit abusive.
Yeah, and finally they get us down to the reactor, which is where they were going to book us. Look at Leo, and man, he hasn't got a scratch on him anywhere.
I remember that. A
Nothing.
few little pieces of weed in his hair.
He's covered with weeds, but not so much as a scratch, and I just couldn't believe it. And so while they're booking us,
Hobbits are that way,
Yeah. While they're booking us, I was the first one, and this cop takes my hand and gets the thumbprint. And I couldn't resist. I smudged it a little bit as I put it in, and he just flipped out, man.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah.
You smudged it.
I smudged it, and so he grabs my hand and tries to squeeze it or something. I don't know what he was trying to do, some pain compliance or whatever it was. And I just squeezed back a little bit. I mean, that's all it was. I didn't even do anything. He was squeezing my hand, so I just squeezed back a little bit. And when I did that, man, there was about 7 of them standing around in their full combat gear, and they were all over me, man. So one of them, they grabbed my hands and pulled them by my back and then raised them up as high as they could while they shoved my head down. So I was kind of jackknifed like that. and then they're all in there kind of punching. But nobody was punching very hard. I didn't even feel any of it. I don't think any of them had any real desire to hurt anybody. They just had to do it because the guy called them in to, whatever.
Ginger got pretty excited. She wanted to get after those cops.
Yeah.
I was on one side of her.
Yeah.
I might have been Tim or somebody on the other side of her, but she was like, "Let me at him," and I'm like, "Oh boy."
So they were slapping these. They put the plastic cuffs on while they had me like that, and then I was so pumped up with adrenaline that when they finished and they just shoved me, trying to shove me on my ass, I just kind of bounced a little bit and landed on my feet, and so I was just standing there, and I had so much. I was pumped up so much I had to do something, so I just snapped the cuffs. And I didn't know if I could or not, but those little plastic cuffs, turns out they're not that hard to snap, I mean, at first it hurts because you're tightening them, and then they pop. So that got them excited. So they put 2 pairs on. So I thought, well, see if I could do 2, So pop, hey. So then they put 6 of them on there. That'd be all right. So then they loaded us all up, and they took us down to the holding pin by the reactor there. And the captain was there. Some guy from Santa Barbara. He was a veteran of the Santa Barbara Bank of America burning of a few years before.
Oh, in Isla Vista.
Yeah, Isla Vista.
Yeah.
So he had a real hard-on for demonstrators, And I was the first one unloaded, and they put me in. They come out with the little nippers. They're going to take off the cuffs and put us in the pen until they transfer us to the jail. And the guy sees the 6 handcuffs on me. He says, "Holy shit, what did you do?" And I didn't have to. And then the captain has gotten word from somebody, and he comes out to take a look, see what's going on here. Like there's some big, I don't know what. But the guy had,
a little better now.
When they were all beating on me and they had my arms behind my back, the guy had grabbed my thumb and tried to pull it, but I had my hand closed and he couldn't do it, so he said, open your hand, and I thought, well, he thinks I have something in my hand, and so I foolishly complied and opened my hand. As soon as he got a hold of my thumb and forefinger, that's what he wanted, and he just as hard as he could, and he kind of did something to my thumb, didn't dislocate it exactly, but pulled, I don't know what it was, some kind of damage, so that it immediately swelled up, and for days that was out of commission, and plus they'd managed to twist my neck pretty good, and I had some real pain there. But when they finally got us to the gym at that college where they were holding us, there was this guy, Caress, remember him, the Russian guy?
Yes.
And he was doing what they call rebirth.
I vaguely remember that.
Yeah. And it's where you had all these people laying down on their mats, and then it was a breathing thing, and he would give these suggestions and everything, and it really worked for me, all that pain and all that pent-up stuff, it just melted away. I was able to let go of it right there.
That's great.
Yeah.
I remember that Wavy Gravy was down there with us in Japan. So was Jackson Brown.
Yeah, the Tornado of Talent.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. The Tornado of Spirituality or something on Sunday morning. And I guess there was a big stink about Robert Blake, who was making a lot of noise about joining the protesters. He was going to talk about it on the Tonight Show. Yeah. But, of course, he didn't.
They wouldn't let him.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, never had a chance. But, that's when Jerry Brown was governor.
All right.
And he was more worried about the medfly.
Well, I was a little bit disappointed in Jerry Brown recently when the Oakland police shot on the protesters up there. And he backed the police completely. Yeah. He said that was right what they did.
Yeah, I had every intention of being at that demonstration, except that was a day I had to come here to Santa Cruz and some family things. So I wasn't there that day, and then I came home and I see what happened there, and I thought, damn, I was lucky. I know they would have probably let me have a couple of them.
The man that doesn't exist.
Good thing I didn't exist that day.
Yeah, I saw some brutal police brutality. It was March 15th up in the city, up on Market Street. There was about 1,000 protesters at Market and Powell Street, and we were all in the street, and the cops, there was a large police presence, and finally they got everybody on the sidewalks, and in the center they had, some Hummers, police, a little Jeep that ran back and forth with a loudspeaker telling people to get on the sidewalks. And then they started blocking off roads and streets that were going off, so they were trying to get everybody contained. And this phalanx of cops were marching up Market Street, and they got to like the intersection, and there were some protesters right on the corner. I was standing right in front of it, and I didn't see any kind of exchange, or cops will usually say, "Oh, somebody threw a rock," but all of a sudden they just broke off with batons flailing into the crowd, and I was there chanting with a drum, Nippon-san style, and all of a sudden the cops started charging towards me because I was sitting on one of those little islands in the middle of Market Street where you catch a bus. All of a sudden, this whole mass of people's flooding over towards me, so I turned and ran with them, and then had to regroup, but the cops started arresting people. They would just surround knots of people and then start picking them off. It's pretty incredible. I went down to the Powell Street BART station, and they had all the metal curtains shut, except for this one was open, just about a foot, with the cop standing right behind it. I squeezed in right behind him. Just after I got through, they shut it, so nobody could leave that way, so they could just arrest everybody. So I got out. I was kind of happy, because I was on my own. Earlier that day, I went to the Israeli consulate by myself and did a prayer vigil for Rachel Corey. And the security guard there got really upset with me. He says, "I can't be there on the sidewalk." I go, "Well, this is public property here. I can be here." He says, "No, you can't. I'm calling the police right now." So he went in, he called up somebody, and so I stayed there for about another 15 minutes. And I was all alone, and I didn't want to get arrested alone in front of the Israeli consulate, doing a prayer vigil for Rachel Corey. So I decided, I probably should leave this one alone. And I left, and he watched as I was going down the street to see where I was going so he could get the cops to go after me. But, they were all busy elsewhere, I'm sure. That was an eventful day. Anyway, so the next thing coming up is Hands Around Livermore on August 10th.
Yeah, every 20 years it seems like.
Why don't you give a little hello to Leo there?
Yeah, Leo. Well, I hope you don't mind me cutting a bull's chops here, talking about you, but...
I think Leo will forgive you.
Okay.
Anyway,
well, I hope you can join us at Livermore, and certainly I know you'll be there in spirit.
Give us a call either way, give me a call down here in Santa Cruz. I'll talk to you soon, I'm sure. And hello to all the listeners up there in Takilma. Marjorie.
Hi, Marjorie.
Yeah. And this is Voices for Peace. This is Goat. And we've had a wonderful interview today. Peace out.